The silence between us was no longer awkward. It had calcified into a permanent feature of our home. Melissa and I used to talk about everything. Now we talked about nothing. Dinner was two people eating in the same room, chewing at the same time, but digesting completely different lives. She sat across from me at the table, scrolling through her phone with her fork poking half-heartedly at the pasta I made. Not a single compliment, not even a grunt of appreciation. Just silence, and the glow of her screen lighting up her face instead of the glow she used to get when I walked in the room. "You okay?" I finally asked, breaking the spell. It was an honest question, the one I asked too often without any honest answers. Melissa didn't look up. "Fine. Just tired." Tired. That was her favorite word lately. Tired from work. Tired from errands. Tired from nothing, sometimes. I missed the nights we used to get tired together, tangled up in sheets, flushed and laughing, collapsing into each other like two puzzle pieces that had finally clicked. "Maybe we can watch something tonight," I offered. "You liked that show with the murder podcasts. What was it called?" "Not tonight," she said flatly, her eyes never leaving her screen. There it was again. Not tonight. The most used phrase in our marriage lately. I wasn't sure what she was saying no to anymore. Sex, conversation, or just me as a whole. I didn't argue. I just nodded and finished my dinner in silence. There was no fight left in me for the night. When she left the table, I stared at her empty plate for a long moment before getting up and doing the dishes alone. That night, she turned away from me in bed. Again. The next day was gray, overcast and humid, like the sky couldn't decide whether to cry or not. I stopped into Leaf and Grain, this cozy little bookstore cafe on 7th Avenue, just to get out of the house. The scent of old pages and espresso was comforting in a way I hadn't felt in a while. As I scanned the shelves, my eyes caught a familiar shape at the corner table near the window. Slender fingers wrapped around a mug, a cascade of deep brown hair falling over one shoulder. Her laugh, quiet, throaty, unmistakable, cut through the static hum of the cafe. Brooke, Melissa's old best friend. We hadn't seen each other in what, over a year? She moved to Seattle after her brutal breakup with that finance guy whose name I'd completely forgotten. It ended badly, if I remembered correctly. Some cheating scandal, something messy and raw. I remember Melissa saying, "Brooke always chooses the wrong kind of guy." I always thought that was a bit harsh. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to say hi. But she looked up, and our eyes met. And just like that, the decision was made. "Ethan," she asked, her voice lifting with genuine surprise. "Brooke," I said, smiling. "Didn't expect to see you back here." She stood up and opened her arms without hesitation. "Come here." We hugged. Warm, familiar. She smelled like cinnamon and coffee and something sweeter underneath that I couldn't quite place, but instantly remembered. "Sit," she said. "Tell me everything." I sat, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a stranger to someone. We talked. Really talked. It was strange how easy it was, considering how long it had been. She told me about moving back last week, how Seattle never felt like home, how she missed the way New York always vibrated beneath her feet. I told her about work, about how nothing had changed, how that was maybe the problem. "You still with Melissa?" she asked, sipping her cappuccino. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, still together." She raised an eyebrow slightly, like she could hear everything I wasn't saying. "She's good." She said it carefully, not loaded, not judgmental. Just careful. "She's doing her own thing lately." I tried to keep my voice neutral. Brooke didn't press, but her eyes, hazel with a trace of green, held mine just a moment too long. The kind of gaze that says, "I get it. I see more than you're letting on." As we talked, something loosened in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed feeling seen. When she laughed at one of my jokes, something dumb about bookstores needing therapy sections closer to the romance aisle, I felt something stir in me. Not lust, not exactly, but something warmer, something like memory. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for her cup, and the contact felt electric. Not accidental. Or maybe it was, but neither of us pulled away. We sat like that for a moment, the quiet stretching between us, heavy with implication. "You know," she said softly, "I always liked talking to you more than Melissa did." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, suddenly shy. "You listened. Most guys don't. Melissa, well, she doesn't always see what she has." My stomach twisted a little. I didn't want to hear that, but I needed to. As I stood to leave, she touched my wrist. "Let's do this again," she said, her voice just above a whisper. If you want to. I do, I said, maybe too quickly. And as I stepped out into the cool breeze, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I felt awake. I told myself I was just going to the bookstore again for coffee. That was the lie I repeated as I stepped into Leaf and Grain 2 days later, casually scanning the tables without making it obvious. My heart beat a little faster when I spotted the same corner booth by the window, empty this time. Disappointment bloomed in my chest before I even made it to the counter. Americano, I told the barista, trying to sound casual. Large or regular? Large, I said, then added without thinking. Is that table by the window taken? She glanced over her shoulder. Nope, all yours. I gave a polite nod, but my thoughts were already spinning. Why was I hoping to see Brooke again? It had only been one coffee, one conversation, but it had felt like oxygen. I settled into the booth and pulled out a book I wasn't going to read. I watched the door. I told myself I wasn't waiting. But every time it opened, I glanced up. And then, there she was. Brooke walked in with that same easy grace, a loose-fitting cream sweater sliding off one shoulder. Her jeans hugged to her like they were custom-made, and her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow made her look even more radiant. She hadn't seen me yet. She ordered at the counter, then turned, coffee in hand, and froze when she spotted me. Her smile spread slowly, and something in me pulled tight. Ethan, she said, walking over like she'd hoped for this too. I didn't plan this, I said with a laugh. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Neither did I, she replied, slipping into the seat across from me. But I'm glad I came. We talked again. This time, it was longer. She told me about the messiness of leaving Seattle, how she broke things off with her last boyfriend after he tried to convince her they should go into business together, some failed tech startup with more ambition than brains. I needed to come home, she said, back to something familiar. New York's not exactly comforting, I said, smiling. No, she agreed, but you are. There it was again, that quiet honesty that seemed to bypass all the usual barriers. I felt myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in months. Maybe longer. You're still in architecture? She asked. Yeah. Same firm, same clients, same city. I design buildings that don't always get built. That sounds unfulfilling. I chuckled. You have no idea. And Melissa? She's still working at the nonprofit? I paused. She's been distant. I don't know if she loves it anymore, or if she loves anything anymore. The words were out before I could pull them back. Brooke's eyes softened, and she reached across the table. Her fingers grazed mine. Not a full touch, just enough to spark something. Her skin was warm. She used to brag about you, you know, she said. I looked at her, skeptical. I'm serious, she went on. Back when we were all still talking, she'd say you were the kind of man who actually listened. Thoughtful. Steady. Steady, I repeated with a dry laugh. That's a nice way of saying boring. Not boring, she said. Safe. In the best way. Her thumb, barely touching mine, started to move. A slow, unconscious rub. There was a moment. A full, thick, impossible moment. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. Just for a second. I swallowed hard. I should probably. Yeah, she said at the same time. But neither of us moved. Eventually, we did part ways. We walked out together. The breeze had picked up, stirring her hair across her cheek. I fought the urge to brush it back. She noticed. At the corner, we paused. She looked at me, really looked. Then she smiled softly, almost shyly, and touched my wrist again. Not my hand this time, but higher, near the inside of my arm. It was so subtle it might have been platonic. But it wasn't. There's something different about you, she said quietly. Different, she nodded. Like something inside you is starting to wake up. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. She turned to go, but as she stepped away, she looked back once more. I'll text you, she said. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there on the sidewalk, pulse racing, the smell of her perfume still clinging to my clothes like a secret. I felt lighter and heavier all at once. Like I'd stepped into something bigger than I understood. Like I'd crossed an invisible line and couldn't walk back. Later that night, Melissa came home late from work. She looked exhausted. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, slipped off her heels, and muttered, "Long day." I nodded, but said nothing. She didn't ask about mine. We brushed our teeth in silence, standing side by side at the sink. She wore an old t-shirt of mine. I used to love that. Now it felt like a borrowed costume. When we got into bed, I turned toward her. Her back was already to me. I hovered a hand over her waist, uncertain. I used to know how to touch her. Now it felt like trying to reach someone through a pane of glass. "Night," she mumbled. I stared at the ceiling long after her breathing evened out. Brooke's words echoed in my mind. "Something inside you is waking up." Maybe it was. And maybe that scared the hell out of me. It started with a simple hey. That night, after Melissa had rolled away from me, again, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone like a man starving for attention. The light from the screen cast a pale blue glow across the bedroom ceiling. Melissa's steady breathing beside me made the silence feel heavier. I stared at the empty message field in Brooke's chat window. Just one word. Hey. Not exactly bold, but not meaningless, either. I didn't expect an immediate reply. It was past midnight, and we were technically just old friends catching up, weren't we? But the dots appeared almost instantly. "Hey you. Couldn't sleep either?" "Nah. Just restless." "Me too. Was thinking about our talk." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to close the app and pretend I hadn't initiated this. But something in her message lingered. Open, soft, personal. So I kept typing. It was nice. Talking with someone who actually listens. That's rare, huh? You have no idea. A pause. Then, "She doesn't listen to you?" I hesitated. The question was direct. Dangerous. But something in the anonymity of late-night texting made the truth easier. Not for a long time. I think I stopped talking before she stopped listening. Brooke's reply came slower this time. That's what happens when love turns into something else. Routine. Obligation. Cold beds. Yeah, that sounds about right. There was another long pause. Then, a message popped up, one she clearly deleted, because all I saw was a notification. "Brooke is typing." Then nothing. I waited, holding my breath. And then it appeared. If I were her. Another pause. The message was gone. But I'd seen it. The ellipsis at the end, pregnant with what she wanted to say, and the fact she'd deleted it. It said everything. I didn't mention it. Neither did she. The next message simply read, "Never mind. You deserve better." I stared at those words longer than I should have. Then I typed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm the one who let it all die." Her reply was instant. "No. You just stopped pretending. There's a difference." Something about that line punched me in the chest. Stop pretending. Was that what I'd been doing for the last few years? Holding up some cardboard cutout of happiness and calling it marriage? You know what's the worst part? I typed. What? I don't even know what intimacy feels like anymore. Not just sex. I mean, really being wanted. I regretted sending that as soon as I hit send. It felt too raw, too exposed. But then, her reply, "I know exactly what you mean." Silence stretched again. I stared at the ceiling. The soft, shallow breath of my wife sleeping inches away from me felt like it came from another world. Brooke messaged one more time before I finally drifted to sleep. "You're not invisible, Ethan. Not to everyone." The next few days became a pattern. Innocent texts at first. Funny memes, shared photos, inside jokes. Then it got deeper. Longer messages. Voice notes. Thoughts we probably hadn't shared with anyone else in years. One night, I told her everything. How Melissa had turned away from my touch even when I reached for her in the dark. How she'd flinched the last time I tried to initiate anything. Like intimacy had become an inconvenience. How we hadn't had sex in nearly 6 months. Brooke's reply was short, but it cut clean. "You didn't deserve that." A few minutes later, another message followed. "You're not wrong for needing to feel wanted. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human." I didn't reply immediately. Not because I didn't agree, but because the weight of her words landed so squarely in the hollow part of my chest, it nearly took my breath away. I wanted to tell her that I missed being looked at the way she used to look at me, years ago, when we were all still close. That I remembered how she used to blush when I complimented her. How her eyes lingered just a little too long when Melissa left the room. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I typed, "What happened with your ex? The one in Seattle?" Brooke's reply came after a full minute. "He cheated. Repeatedly. Told me I was too serious. Not fun enough. Too steady. Sound familiar? Too familiar. Funny how the good ones always get called boring by people who don't know what it means to stay." That line stuck with me the rest of the night. People who don't know what it means to stay. Melissa was good at showing up for appointments, for commitments, for other people. Just not for me. On Friday night, Melissa was late again. She texted me at 6:43 p.m., running behind. "Don't wait up." That was it. No explanation. No apology. I sat at the kitchen table, dinner for two cooling in the soft light above me, and stared at the empty chair across from mine. I picked up my phone. Ethan, you busy? Brooke, just got out of the shower. What's up? Ethan, nothing. Just didn't want to sit in silence again. Brooke, you want to hear something crazy? Ethan, always. Brooke, I used to have a little crush on you. Back when you and Melissa were still new. I froze, stared at the screen, read the message again, and again. My heart thudded in my chest as I typed. Ethan used to? 3 dots. Then, Brooke is typing. Used to? I stared at the words I had sent, each letter a live wire now sparking between Brooke and me. My thumb hovered over the screen, like I could take it back. Like maybe I should have. But I didn't. And she didn't make me wait long. Brooke, maybe it never really went away. I leaned back against the kitchen chair, exhaling slowly. There it was. The moment. No more subtext. No more lingering glances or friendly catch-ups wrapped in casual excuses. This was a different conversation now. A different energy. Dangerous. Electric. Ethan, that's a lot to admit. Brooke, you asked. Ethan, yeah. And I'm glad I did. I looked around the room. Melissa still wasn't home. Her pasta sat cold in the pan on the stove, untouched. A small bead of condensation slid down the side of my wine glass, still full. I typed. Ethan, I think I always wondered, back then. There was something in your eyes. Brooke, you noticed? Ethan, I did. But I told myself I was imagining it. That I was already taken. Brooke, you were. By someone who didn't really see you. Her words lit a slow fire in my chest. It was the kind of pain that felt warm instead of sharp, because someone, finally, was naming it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in bed while Melissa snored softly beside me, her back turned as always. My mind played a reel of memories I hadn't accessed in years. Brooke's laugh, the way she used to roll her eyes when Melissa interrupted her, the quiet glances when we all went out together, how she never sat directly next to me, but close enough that I noticed the absence when she left the room. Now those things didn't feel imagined. They felt like a missed chapter that I was finally starting to read. 2 days later, we agreed to meet. Just for coffee. Again. Neutral ground. Safe, right? But this time it wasn't at Leaf and Grain. She chose a quiet little spot in Prospect Park, a place without the risk of familiar eyes or shared memories. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench beneath a blooming elm tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves like something out of a photograph. She wore a soft green sundress, modest but sleeveless, her bare arms catching the golden light. I couldn't help but stare at the curve of her shoulder, the way her hair caught the breeze. She looked up and smiled. My chest tightened. Hey, I said, settling beside her, just enough space between us to be appropriate. Barely. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I glanced at her, careful. I almost didn't. She nodded, looking down at her coffee. I get that. We sat in silence for a minute. But not an awkward one. Just full. Charged. I need to tell you something, I said finally. Brooke turned toward me, her eyes steady. Okay. I'm not sure where this is going. I'm not even sure what I'm doing right now. But the last few nights, talking to you, texting with you, it's been the first time I've felt anything real in. I don't even know how long. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. I've been dying quietly in that house, I went on. And somehow, a few words from you made me feel like I could breathe again. Brooke's expression shifted. Her throat moved like she swallowed something hard. You don't know what that means to hear. Melissa's not cruel. She's just gone. She checks out when she's home and checks in when she leaves. It's like we're both ghosts haunting the same space. Brooke nodded slowly. I know the feeling. Then she turned fully to me, and something in her eyes changed. So let me ask you something. Okay, if I said, right now, this second, that I wanted you to kiss me, what would you do? My pulse spiked. I'd ask if you were serious. Her voice dropped, a whisper now. I am. My breath caught. For a second, the world shrank. No footsteps on the path. No distant hum of traffic. Just the sound of my heartbeat hammering in my ears, and the way her eyes never looked away from mine. I leaned in, slowly, giving her the space to change her mind. She didn't. When our lips met, it wasn't wild or frantic. It was soft, careful, but it lingered, longer than it should have. Her hand found the back of my neck, her fingers brushing the skin like she was memorizing the shape of me. I pulled back slightly, our foreheads nearly touching. I shouldn't, I whispered. I know, she replied. But I wanted to. A pause. I've wanted to for a long time. I exhaled, trying to steady myself. That kiss. It didn't feel like a mistake. Because it wasn't. She leaned back just enough to meet my eyes again, her voice soft but certain. I'm not here to be a distraction, Ethan. I'm not here to blow up your life. But I need you to know, you're not broken. You're not invisible. And you don't deserve to be unloved. Those words gutted me. Because deep down, they were everything I had forgotten I needed. I wanted to kiss her again. Wanted to forget the world and just get lost in her warmth. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I reached for her hand. Held it. And for the first time in what felt like years, someone held me back. The first time Brooke and I made love, it wasn't in some shadowy hotel room or a reckless backseat tumble. It was in her apartment, on her terms, on her bed, with the softest sheets I'd ever felt against my skin. The moment wasn't rushed or messy. It was quiet, reverent, almost unbearably intimate. She opened the door wearing an oversized sweater that slid off one shoulder, revealing a sliver of collarbone that made me ache. She smelled like vanilla and something deeper underneath, something warm and earthy, like skin kissed by rain. You sure you want this? I had asked at the threshold, heart racing. I've never been more sure, she said, her voice low and sure. I'm done pretending, Ethan. We didn't jump into each other. We didn't rush. Instead, she touched my face, and I kissed her like I was afraid she might vanish if I wasn't gentle. When our clothes finally came off, it wasn't about sex. It was about being seen, being wanted, being known. Every breath, every moan, every whispered name. It felt like a language we both remembered but hadn't spoken in years. And when I lay beside her afterward, our bodies tangled in heat and limbs and the faint scent of sweat and lavender, I didn't feel like a man who had cheated. I felt like a man who had come home. The next morning, I woke to her watching me. The sunlight sliced across her face, casting golden lines across her cheek and collarbone. Her fingers were tracing lazy patterns on my chest. I don't want to be your escape, she whispered, as if reading my thoughts. I want to be your choice. I looked her in the eye. That vulnerable place in me cracked wide open now. You are. And I meant it. Even though I hadn't said a word to Melissa yet. Even though I still went home that night and crept into bed beside a woman who didn't stir when I walked in. The guilt didn't hit me the way I expected. It wasn't shame I felt. It was clarity. I had finally stopped pretending. Still, I didn't tell Melissa. Not yet. Instead, I began living two lives. By day, I was the dutiful husband. I washed the dishes, paid the bills, walked the dog, sat across the dinner table from Melissa, and tried to pretend I wasn't aching for someone else. By night, or rather, by stolen hours, I was with Brooke, her hands in my hair, her laugh echoing in her kitchen while she cooked in nothing but one of my button-downs. Her lips pressed to the inside of my wrist as she said, I missed you today. And God help me, I missed her too. Melissa noticed something was different. She just didn't ask. Or maybe she didn't want to know. One night, we sat watching some crime show, her curled up in a blanket on the opposite end of the couch. I glanced at her, trying to remember the last time I'd seen her smile without effort. I've been thinking, I said. She didn't look at me. That's dangerous. I was wondering if maybe we should talk to someone. A counselor. Maybe. Try to fix things. Her reaction was instant. A slight scoff. Almost like a cough she didn't bother to cover. We're fine, Ethan. No, we're not, I said gently. We haven't been fine in a long time. She finally looked over, her eyes distant. I'm not doing therapy. You can, if you want. That's not the point. She cut me off. You've been checked out for months. Don't act like I'm the problem here. That stung more than I thought it would. Not because it wasn't true, but because of how quickly she pushed the blame, like she had it queued up already. That night, she turned her back on me again in bed. But instead of lying there in silence, I picked up my phone and texted Brooke. Ethan, can't sleep. Brooke, come over. I didn't even reply. I just got dressed, grabbed my keys, and left. At Brooke's apartment, the lights were dim. A single candle flickered on the nightstand, casting shadows on the wall as she opened the door in a silk robe that clung to her like a second skin. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, but I didn't move. She came to me, placed a hand on my chest. Rough night. I nodded. I tried. I really did. Brooke didn't say anything. She just pulled me close, her lips brushing my neck before whispering. You don't have to try anymore. Not there. We didn't rush. We moved like people who knew each other's pain, whose touches weren't just about desire, but about stitching closed wounds. That night, she didn't just take my body, she took the weight I'd been carrying. And for a little while, I felt whole again. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets. Her head on my shoulder, her leg draped over mine. She looked up at me. You still haven't told her, have you? I shook my head. Not yet. Are you going to? I think I have to. Brooke nodded. She didn't pressure me, didn't guilt me. She just whispered, when you do, don't do it because you feel bad. Do it because you're ready to live for real again. And that was the thing. With Brooke, it didn't feel like I was cheating. It felt like I was finally telling the truth. It was the little things that finally gave her away. Melissa had always been guarded. Even when she was affectionate, back when we still touched, still cared, there was a certain reserve to her. But lately, something had shifted again. Only this time, it wasn't coldness. It was distraction. She wore perfume again. Subtle, floral, different from the scent she used to wear. She started locking her phone when she left the room, setting it face down on the table. She smiled at her screen once, just once, when she thought I wasn't looking, and my stomach dropped. You don't forget that kind of smile. The kind someone wears when they feel wanted. And I hadn't seen her smile like that in a very long time. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe it was a friend, or a funny meme, or some inside joke I wasn't privy to. But that small voice, the one I'd been ignoring for far too long, begged me to pay attention. Then one evening, it happened. The moment that made the whole illusion collapse. She was cooking in the kitchen, sauté pan in one hand, her phone in the other. I came up behind her, trying to be light, casual. Need help? I asked. She startled, nearly dropping her phone. Jesus, Ethan, don't sneak up on me like that. Didn't mean to. Just offering a hand. She set her phone on the counter, face down, again, and stirred whatever she was cooking with exaggerated focus. I reached for her phone. It wasn't snooping. It was instinct. And it buzzed just as my fingers brushed the edge of it. The screen lit up before the lock kicked in. Caleb, miss you already. Can't wait for Friday. My blood turned cold. Miss you already. Can't wait. For Friday. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She turned toward me, catching my eyes lingering on the screen. There was a flicker of fear, then something worse, resignation. How long? I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Just turned off the stove burner with an unnecessary click and leaned back against the counter. You've been checked out for months, Ethan, she said flatly. What did you expect? That's not an answer. She crossed her arms. Almost a year. That hit harder than I expected. Not just because of the length, but because of the ease with which she said it. Like it wasn't some life-shattering confession, but an overdue bill she was tired of ignoring. Who is he? His name's Caleb. I nodded slowly. You love him? She exhaled through her nose, more annoyance than grief. No, I don't even know what it is. He listens. He touches me like he wants to. I didn't plan for it. It just happened. The same words I could have said, but hearing them from her felt like a slap. You didn't plan it, I repeated bitterly. But you kept it going. I didn't know how to stop, she said. Every time I looked at you, you were somewhere else. Sad. Distant. I figured maybe you'd already found someone too. I flinched, and that was enough for her to narrow her eyes. Oh my God, she said. You did. You're seeing someone. I didn't say anything. The silence spoke for me. Who is it? Does it matter? I said quietly. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she laughed. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Just tired. I guess we both gave up a long time ago, she said. I sank into a chair, the air feeling too heavy. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to be the one to end it. She shrugged. It was easier when we were both pretending. That sentence gutted me. Because it was true. We were both pretending. Only I hadn't realized how long she'd been doing it too. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. Melissa didn't come downstairs. I didn't check to see if she was awake. We didn't speak. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was absolute. I drove to work in a fog, skipped meetings, didn't respond to emails. At lunch, I parked my car on a side street and stared at nothing. And then I texted her. Ethan, I know everything now. I saw the message. And I told her the truth too. I didn't wait for a reply. I drove straight to Brooks. When she opened the door, I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. She looked at my face, tired, raw, and stepped aside. I walked in, dropped my bag, and stood there for a moment like I wasn't sure if I was still allowed. She reached out, brushing a hand across my cheek. "She knows?" she asked. I nodded. "She's been seeing someone too. For almost a year." Brooke's eyes widened, then softened. "You okay?" I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know what I am." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me. "You're free," she whispered. "That's what you are." I let the words sink in. I didn't feel free. I felt hollow. But there was something else too, a quiet, fragile relief. When she pulled back, she kissed me, not with hunger or urgency, but with gratitude, with presence. We didn't talk more that night. We just held each other, letting the silence settle around us in a way that didn't feel like a wall, but a blanket. And when we lay down together, there was no weight, no guilt, only truth. It was strange how calm Melissa seemed when we finally sat down to talk. No tears, no anger, no accusations. Just two people at a kitchen table, sharing the final pages of a story we had both stopped writing years ago. "I didn't hate you," she said. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched. "I want that to be clear. I never thought you did." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on some invisible point over my shoulder. "I think we just stopped seeing each other. Like we turned into roommates who happened to share a bed." "We didn't even share that," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from creeping in. Her lips pressed together. "You're right." There was a long pause. Then she looked at me. Really looked, for the first time in months. "Why didn't you say anything before this?" "I did," I said. "You just stopped hearing me." "I didn't want to hear you," she admitted. "Because if I did, I would have had to face what we were becoming. And I wasn't ready." "Are you now?" She let out a breath. "Yes, because it's already happened." I waited. "I've been planning to leave," she said. "For months. I just hadn't worked up the nerve. Caleb was convenient. He gave me an excuse to feel something again. But I wasn't staying for him." "Then why?" She shrugged. "Habit. Guilt. Fear. Pick one." I watched her fingers trace the edge of the mug, delicate movements that reminded me of a version of her that no longer existed. "You told me once I was safe," I said. "That you chose me because I was steady, reliable." "I did. And now?" She looked me in the eyes. "You were safe, but you weren't enough." It was like a slap to the face, but not the kind that stung. It was numbing, distant, like hearing an old recording of someone you used to know saying something cruel with a voice you once loved. She wasn't trying to be cruel. But honesty, real honesty, rarely comes without pain. "I'm not blaming you," she said quickly. "We both let go, but I think I knew even back then. I wasn't meant to stay." "You didn't give me a chance," I said, the words catching in my throat. She tilted her head. Would it have changed anything? I wanted to say yes. That if she had been honest, we could have gone to therapy or tried to fix what was broken. But deep down, I knew the truth. We had already lost each other long before either of us stepped outside the marriage. Maybe that's why it didn't feel like betrayal when she said it. It felt like release. Later that evening, I packed a bag. Just a few things. Enough to get by for a while. Melissa watched from the hallway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I'll stay at Brooks," I said, not trying to hide it. She didn't flinch. I figured. I'm not running away. "I know." Another pause. "Are you in love with her?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." She swallowed, and for the first time, something cracked in her face. Not jealousy, not regret, just the sting of finality. "I hope it's real," she said. "I really do." That surprised me. "I don't want to hate you," she continued. "I want to move on. Cleanly. We can try." She stepped forward and held out her hand. I took it, not knowing what else to do. Her grip was firm, familiar, the last echo of something we'd both outgrown. When she let go, it felt like the door had finally closed. At Brooke's apartment, the air felt different. Warmer, quieter, more alive. She opened the door in sweatpants and a tank top, her hair messy, glasses perched on her nose. She looked like home. "You told her?" she asked. I nodded and stepped inside. "She's been planning to leave me for months." Brooke blinked. Wow. She just didn't want to say it out loud. "You okay?" I dropped my bag near the couch, turned to her. "I don't know, but I'm here." She stepped into my arms, and I buried my face in her shoulder. She smelled like lavender and sleep. Like truth. "You're not broken," she whispered. "You were just stuck in the wrong story." I pulled back enough to look at her. "And this? This is the right one." She smiled, brushing her thumb across my cheek. Feels like it. We didn't make love that night. We didn't need to. We curled up on the couch beneath a blanket. We talked. We listened. We kissed softly when the silence felt too full. It wasn't lust driving us anymore. It was trust. Over the next few days, Melissa and I exchanged emails, civil, logistical, mechanical, dividing furniture, discussing bank accounts. We agreed to sell the house eventually. There was no venom, no courtroom threats, just quiet exits. Brooke stayed by my side through it all. She didn't push. She didn't cling. She just showed up, day after day, in small ways that mattered more than she knew. A packed lunch when I forgot to eat. A note on the bathroom mirror, "You're doing better than you think." A look across the room that said, "You're not alone anymore." One night, as I washed the dishes, she came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, pressed her cheek to my back. "You really okay?" she asked. I dried my hands and turned to face her. I'm getting there. And I was. Because for the first time in years, the truth didn't feel like something to hide. It felt like something I could live inside. Brooke's apartment always smelled like something warm. A mix of coffee grounds, worn paperback pages, and her skin. I didn't realize how numb my senses had become until I started waking up next to her, fully aware of every scent, every texture, every breath. We'd spent the last 3 nights wrapped in each other, not just in bed, but in every way that mattered. We made dinner together. She stole my t-shirts and wore them around barefoot. I found a toothbrush waiting in the bathroom drawer beside hers. She never said I had to stay, but she made space for me anyway. I lay there one morning, watching her sleep, her face half buried in the pillow, one hand curled beneath her cheek. The blanket had slipped down, exposing the curve of her shoulder, the soft line of her spine. She looked peaceful, like she'd finally stopped bracing for the world. My hand moved before my thoughts caught up. I touched her gently, tracing a line from her shoulder blade down to her hip, the way you might run your finger along a piece of music you didn't want to forget. She stirred but didn't wake. My mouth found her shoulder. A slow kiss. Then another. A soft hum rose in her throat. "Morning," she whispered, eyes still closed. "Morning," I murmured against her skin. She rolled toward me, still half asleep, and pulled herself into my arms. Our bodies aligned like they were made to fit. No urgency, no performance, just the kind of quiet gravity that pulls two people together after they've both stopped pretending. My hand slid along her waist, and her breath caught just slightly. Her leg curled over mine. The blankets rustled. "I like waking up like this," she said, eyes fluttering open. "With you." "Me too." She kissed me, slow, deliberate. No rush, no distraction. Her lips moved like she wanted to savor me. Like this moment wasn't a prelude, but the main act. Her hands found my chest, then slid lower, fingers grazing the edges of my desire like she knew exactly where I broke apart. When I exhaled, she smiled. "I love how you look at me," she whispered. "Like I'm not just skin and bone." "You're not," I said. "You're everything I thought I lost." When we made love, it wasn't like those early frantic moments, desperate and hungry. It was deeper, slower. We kissed between words. We held each other while the morning sun crept through the curtains, painting our bodies in golden slashes of light. Afterward, she lay against me, her head resting on my chest, fingers idly tracing my ribs. "I've never felt this kind of peace," she said. "Neither have I." She looked up, her eyes searching mine. "So this is it then? No more secrets?" "No more secrets," I said. Her expression changed, something softer, more vulnerable. "You really told her everything?" "I did. And you're not going back?" I reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm exactly where I want to be." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "You don't know how long I've waited to hear that." "I think I do." She kissed me again, slow, unhurried, and then smiled. "I want us to stop hiding," she said. "We're not," I replied. "Not anymore." That afternoon, we walked through the neighborhood, hand in hand. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I touched someone in public with love instead of obligation. People passed by without a second glance. We weren't doing anything scandalous. We were just two people in love, out in the open. But to us, it felt revolutionary. At a small corner cafe, we sat across from each other, sipping iced coffees and letting the breeze drift between us. Brooke looked radiant in the sunlight. Hair pulled up, sunglasses perched on her head, a soft smile curling her lips. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. I shook my head. Honestly, no. I thought about you back then, but never like this. Back then, I used to wonder what it would be like to be yours. Her voice was soft, barely audible above the hum of the street. You are, I said. Now? All the way. We clinked glasses like a silent toast. To truth. To choosing. To starting over. Later that night, as we sat curled up on the couch, her legs over mine, her head resting against my shoulder, she said something I'll never forget. I don't want to be your rebound. I turned to look at her. You're not. She gave a small smile, but there was hesitation in her eyes. I need to know this isn't about escaping her. It's not, I said without pause. It's about finally arriving somewhere I was meant to be all along. She looked at me, her eyes glassy but brave. Because I want to be your choice, Ethan, not your consequence. I took her face in my hands, brushed my thumbs gently across her cheeks. You're not my consequence, I whispered. You're the thing I didn't know I had the right to hope for. She kissed me then, deep, anchoring, full of belief, and I kissed her back with every inch of my soul. No guilt, no shame, no more hiding in corners or wondering what could have been. Just this, just her, just us. Melissa didn't cry when she left. She didn't slam a door or throw accusations across the room like knives. There was no shouting, no grand scene. She just packed her things, methodically, like she was folding the last chapter of our life into boxes she no longer wanted to carry. I watched her move through the house like a ghost, pausing every now and then to glance at something. A framed photo from Barcelona, a trinket from our 10th anniversary trip, a wine cork we once wrote the date on in a drunken swirl of affection. She didn't take those. She left the memories behind, like they belonged to someone else. You're not taking this? I asked, holding up the photo of us on the cliffs in Cinque Terre. Her head rested on my shoulder in the picture, both of us sunburnt and smiling. No, she said quietly. It feels like someone else's life. There was no malice in her voice. Just truth. Simple, final. She zipped up the last suitcase and looked around the bedroom. I'm leaving the bed, she said. Figured I shouldn't bring bad sleep with me. I let out a soft laugh, despite everything. She gave me a small smile in return. You don't hate me, do you? I shook my head. No. I think we both just held on too long. She stepped forward then, almost cautiously, and touched my arm. I did love you, Ethan. I know, I said. I loved you too. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It was a eulogy. She squeezed my arm gently, then walked past me. Her suitcase wheels hummed against the hardwood floor as she made her way down the hall. When the front door opened, a gust of spring air followed, lifting a forgotten receipt off the console table and carrying it to the floor. Melissa hesitated in the doorway. We were good for a while, she said. I nodded. Yeah, we were. Then she walked out. Just like that. I stood there, staring at the closed door, half expecting to feel heartbreak. But all I felt was stillness. Not the kind that presses on your chest like grief, but the kind that comes right before the first deep breath. I exhaled, and then I picked up the receipt. It was from a florist. 12 red roses. Caleb's name was in the shipping details. Funny, she'd never liked roses. That night, I sat on the back porch with a whiskey in my hand and a blanket draped across my lap. The backyard looked different now. Bigger somehow. Quieter. The garden beds she used to obsess over were overgrown. A single solar light flickered near the fence like it was unsure whether to stay lit. I thought I'd feel hollow. Instead, I felt light. I didn't feel relief because she was gone. I felt relief because I didn't have to pretend anymore. I took a sip of whiskey, the burn settling somewhere deep in my chest, and texted Brooke. Ethan, she's gone. The dots appeared instantly. Brooke, you okay? Ethan, strangely, yeah. Brooke, want company? Ethan, always. She showed up 20 minutes later, no makeup, hoodie, hair in a messy bun, a pint of ice cream in one hand, and a bottle of wine in the other. This is my version of emotional first aid, she said, holding them up as I opened the door. I stepped aside. Consider me your patient. We curled up on the couch, legs tangled beneath the blanket. She scooped a spoonful of mint chocolate chip and popped it in my mouth before stealing one for herself. So, how do you feel? She asked between bites. Like something ended, but I'm okay with it. She nodded. It was already over. Today was just paperwork. I looked at her, admiring the way she spoke with that effortless clarity. How did I miss this? You. Us. You didn't, she said. You just weren't ready. We shared the wine in silence, letting the hours pass without needing to fill every gap. Eventually, she leaned her head against my chest and whispered, "You're allowed to be happy now." I kissed her temple. "I already am." In the days that followed, Melissa's absence became presence in a strange way. Her toothbrush was gone, but the spot on the bathroom counter felt larger than it should. Her favorite tea sat untouched in the cabinet. Every drawer I opened seemed to echo the fact that a life had been edited out of mine. But it wasn't sadness that lingered. It was clarity. I spent more time with Brooke, open time. We went grocery shopping together, made dinner while dancing to 90s playlists. She organized my spice rack and laughed when I confessed I didn't know what half of them were for. One night, as we lay in bed, she rolled over and traced a finger along my jaw. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. I thought about it. About all the choices, the silences, the secrets. About Melissa and the years we spent growing apart while pretending we were still together. "I regret how long I stayed stuck," I said. "But I don't regret where it led me." She smiled. "That's fair. I do have one regret, though." "What's that?" "Not kissing you the first time I thought about it. All those years ago." Her smile widened. "You would have ruined me for other men." "Still might." She kissed me then, deep, slow, lingering. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Good," I replied. "Because neither am I." We didn't call it a vacation. There was no itinerary, no agenda, no Instagram-worthy plan. Just a bag each, a tank of gas, and a weekend away from everything that had ever made us forget how to feel. Brooke had suggested it, casually, over coffee one morning, her legs folded beneath her on the couch, her hair still messy from sleep. "What if we just disappeared for a couple days?" "Disappeared?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She shrugged. "Not forever, just enough to breathe." So we drove, out past the city noise and the crowded sidewalks, past the strip malls and the clinging weight of routine, through winding roads lined with wildflowers and forgotten barns, until we found a small cabin nestled by a lake, half hidden by pine trees and the promise of solitude. We unpacked in silence, not because we had nothing to say, but because everything we needed to say was already understood. That first night, we sat by the fire pit, the flames casting shadows across her face as she curled up beside me under a thick wool blanket. She sipped red wine from a chipped ceramic mug, and I watched the way her eyes flickered in the firelight. "This place," she said, leaning into me, "feels like the edge of the world." Maybe that's what we needed, to stand on the edge. She looked up at me, a half-smile tugging at her lips. "Do you ever miss it?" "The marriage?" She nodded. "I miss the idea of it," I said honestly. "Not the reality. I miss who I thought we were, who I thought I was in it." Her hand found mine under the blanket, her fingers weaving through mine. "You're still that person." I shook my head. "No, I'm not." She blinked, startled. "I'm better now," I added softly. A smile bloomed across her face, not wide, but deep. The kind of smile that reached her eyes and pulled something warm from my chest. "I thought love was something that faded with time," I said. "Something you just got used to losing." She turned fully toward me, brushing her thumb across my cheek. "Only when it's with the wrong person." The next morning, I woke to birdsong and sunlight dripping through gauzy curtains. Brooke lay sprawled beside me, one leg thrown across the sheets, her hair a wild halo against the pillow. Her bare shoulder rose and fell with each breath. I watched her for a moment, content just to exist beside her. When her eyes fluttered open, she smiled without speaking, stretching like a cat. "You stare at me a lot," she murmured. "Guilty. You always thinking so loud." "Only when I'm with you." She laughed, soft and warm. "God, I forgot what this felt like. Waking up and wanting to be touched, not avoiding it." "I know the feeling." She rolled on top of me, straddling my hips, her hair falling forward like a curtain around our faces. "What if we just stayed here? In this cabin? In this feeling?" I ran my hands along her sides. Then I'd never ask for anything more. Her kiss was slow, sleepy and soft, full of unspoken vows we hadn't yet said out loud. Later, we ate pancakes on the porch, barefoot, legs tangled under the table. She told me about her childhood summers at her grandparents' cabin, about falling out of trees and scraping her knees, about the first time she snuck a cigarette behind the shed and got caught. I told her about the time I almost ran away when I was 11. packed 2 peanut butter sandwiches and a comic book, and got as far as the end of the street before I chickened out. We shared every piece of ourselves like puzzle pieces scattered on the table, not trying to rush the picture, just letting it take shape, one story at a time. That night, the rain came. Thunder rolled in soft waves, and the storm knocked out the power just after sunset. We lit candles and played old records on Brooke's portable turntable. The crackle of vinyl filled the room, along with the smell of rain through the open windows. She danced barefoot across the wooden floor, swaying with a glass of wine in hand, hair spilling down her back. I watched her from the couch, overwhelmed with the sheer beauty of the moment, its simplicity, its honesty. "You're not dancing," she said, twirling toward me. "I'm watching." "Don't watch. Be in it." She grabbed my hand and pulled me to my feet. I let her lead, awkward at first, but she just laughed and pressed her body close. My arms found her waist, and together we moved to the rhythm of something ancient, something deeper than music. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Later, lying beside her on the floor, limbs tangled, the candles flickering low, she whispered, "Do you think it's really possible to start over?" I turned to face her. "I don't think it's possible with everyone, but with the right person?" She nodded slowly, waiting. "I think it's not just possible," I said. "I think it's necessary." She leaned in and kissed me, soft, slow, the kind of kiss that says, "Thank you for finding me in the wreckage." And in that moment, I knew, starting over wasn't about forgetting what came before. It was about honoring it by finally getting it right. 3 months later, the rhythm of our lives had shifted into something that didn't feel borrowed or fragile anymore. It felt real. Solid. Ours. Brooke and I were living together now, in a sun-drenched apartment downtown with creaky wooden floors and a clawfoot tub that leaked just enough to make you swear every third morning. We hadn't moved in out of urgency. There was no crash, no rush, no desperation to escape something. We'd just grown toward each other. It started with a toothbrush, then a drawer, then a key, until one day we looked around and realized everything we owned was already intertwined. Books on the same shelves, clothes mixed in the same laundry basket. Our lives folded into each other like pages of the same story. On Sunday mornings, she danced in the kitchen to Stevie Wonder while flipping pancakes. I fixed leaky faucets and burnt coffee with equal incompetence. We shared a Google Calendar, a grocery list, a playlist that somehow had both the National and old Alanis Morissette. We argued, too. Not all the time, but sometimes. About dishes, about plans, about things that didn't matter and things that did. But the difference now? We didn't stop talking. We didn't shut down. We stayed. One night, after a long day of work and bills and nothing particularly poetic, we ended up on the couch, curled up beneath a blanket, both of us too tired to talk. The TV flickered softly, forgotten. Her head rested on my chest. I ran my fingers lazily through her hair, listening to her breathing slow, syncing with mine. And then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "Still think it was a mistake?" I looked down. Her eyes were half closed, her voice barely more than breath. "What? Us? That first kiss? That first night? Leaving what we had before?" I didn't answer right away, because I remembered what it was like before her. The silence in my old house. The emptiness that felt like furniture I had to live around. The ache of being unseen, untouched, unchosen. And I remembered the kiss. The one she offered so gently, the one I thought I shouldn't take, but needed to. The one that rewrote everything. I kissed her temple and whispered, "No." It was finally the right choice. She smiled, eyes still closed. "Say it again." "The right choice," I said. Not just because she was beautiful. Not just because the sex was mind-blowing or the connection was electric. But because every day I woke up next to her, I didn't feel like I was borrowing time. I felt like I had arrived. In early June, we visited the coast. Nothing fancy, just a long weekend in a rented cottage that smelled like driftwood and lemon. The kind of place where the sea hums beneath your skin and even your bones feel lighter. On the second night, we sat barefoot in the sand, a bottle of wine between us and the sky slowly bruising into dusk. "You ever think about what would have happened if we never saw each other again?" she asked, drawing a lazy circle in the sand with her toes. "Sometimes. And I think I would have just kept shrinking," I said, bit by bit, until there was nothing left of me that remembered what love even felt like. She turned toward me, her hair a mess of wind and salt and moonlight. You think we got lucky? No, I said. I think we chose to stop lying to ourselves. That's different than luck. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. You saved me, she said. You saved me first. She laughed. God, we sound like a Hallmark movie. Maybe, I said, kissing the top of her head. But with better sex. She snorted, then kissed my jaw. Way better. One night not long after we got back, I found her curled up in bed reading, wearing my hoodie, her legs tucked under a blanket. She looked up and smiled as I walked in. You know what I never told you? She said. What? That night in the park. When I said, what if I said right now? Yeah. I was terrified you'd say no. I raised an eyebrow. Terrified? You looked fearless. I wasn't, she said. I just needed you to choose me first. Even for a second. I sat beside her and took her hand. I've been choosing you every day since. She looked at our joined hands, then back at me. I want to be the woman you don't have to heal from. You are, I said. We lay down together, the room bathed in the soft hum of city lights beyond the window. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The whisper between us wasn't just words anymore. It was trust. Rebuilt. Real. Melissa and I didn't speak much after she left. A few emails. One brief, awkward phone call to finalize the house sale. She was moving out of state. A fresh start. We wished each other well, though we both knew neither of us would reach out again. There was no dramatic closure, just quiet understanding. We were the bridge that led us both somewhere else. Months after the dust had truly settled, Brooke and I sat on our tiny balcony one late September evening. She was wrapped in a blanket, legs over mine, a mug of cider in her hands. What now? She asked. I didn't hesitate. Everything, I said. She smiled. Everything. Everything we thought we missed. A breeze passed between us, cool and crisp, filled with the smell of fallen leaves and something that smelled suspiciously like burnt toast from a neighbor's window. She leaned into me and whispered, then let's not waste any more time. I kissed her hand. We won't. And we didn't.